Hello, this is Durham Walrieger, President and CEO of the Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders, and I'm really pleased to be able to provide you with a very brief summary of our activities for fiscal year April 2020 to the end of March 2021, but up to today, actually. This is the report that for the AGM. And what I want to make clear is that despite the graphics, we were definitely not napping this year. So here are the things that really transpired over the year. And I say it was March 2020 was our real spring of hope. It was a great opportunity for us to think about how we could advance all of the opportunities that were put before us. And it turned into, of course, a year of nonstop advocacy. As we all know, March 9th and 10th was the court conference. We launched the rare disease drug strategy based on the promise of the federal government for a plan to set up the first Canadian drug strategy. And we began to initiate consultations with Health Canada, sat down with them at the time of this conference. Unfortunately, almost immediately afterwards, March 17, 2020, Ontario and certainly the rest of Canada called for a state of emergency and all businesses were closed. I think for most of us, we thought it was going to be somewhat temporary. But as we move forward, we began to see that, in fact, April 2020, in the middle of the Patent Medicine Prices Review Board consultations, they actually canceled their consultation meetings. But the good news was that they decided to delay the implementation of their new highly restrictive pricing guidelines. It took us a little while to, I think, work through the summer to figure out that we were not actually going to be lifting and getting out of COVID right away, but that we would need to figure out how to work during COVID. And we recognized that we could not wait to begin to move forward on some of the very important opportunities. Most importantly, of course, is the rare disease drug strategy. Two major things we undertook, well, three actually. In October, we initiated the first ever court patient advocacy training. This was 10 bi-weekly sessions held virtually, really exciting opportunity for us, 60 patients and patient advocates, including representatives from industry and academia that joined us during this period of time. We also began in 2020 a series of bi-weekly webinar series to really begin to start the consultations on the rare disease drug strategy, recognizing that Health Canada was really fully focused on COVID. We did not want to lose the opportunity that we could actually implement a rare disease drug strategy by January 2022, so began ourselves to host these consultation meetings. December 16th, for those of you who were with us, we actually held in what we called a two-day conference for designing one-day conference on designing a blueprint for the Pan-Canadian Rare Drug Program. This built on the webinars that we've been hosting and actually then was a sort of a transition point for our ongoing consultations into the next year. In February, we held our Rare Disease Day celebration, and it was actually a virtual celebration, but quite a lot of opportunities to really recognize the progress that rare diseases have been making in Canada, and certainly the huge amount of support from all stakeholders that were taking place, everybody coming together. In March, we held our Rare Disease Drug Strategy Conference from the 9th to 10th, exactly 1 year since we held the in-person one in Ottawa, to really bring together what were we learning, what are we proposing in terms of a drug strategy. And then following that, we actually held a number of other strategy meetings, and then just this past couple months have been coming back to some of the webinars that we've been hosting around the Patent Medicine Prices Review Board. I just wanted to give you a rundown in terms of what we've been doing, definitely not napping, but also now I'll give you an opportunity, I'll take the opportunity to provide you with a little bit more in depth on what we've been taking place. So the context and the opportunity, why did we do all of these activities? Good gosh, 20-some, 26-some webinars over a period of time. Well, we still are the only country that does not have a national plan for rare disease medicines. We recognize that in 2019, the federal government made this commitment of up to $1 billion over 2 years, to invest in a national strategy for rare disease treatments. This was, in fact, our vision and what we wanted to work towards. 2020, the economics fall statement, Speech from the Throne, reaffirmed this commitment. And certainly we recognize that we've been building strong support, not just for the rare disease drug strategy, but also for the rare disease strategy. So as you know, we were coming out of the election in 2019, we knew that we had strong liberal and conservative support. And over this past year, wanted to make sure that we were taking full advantage of that to ensure that we're going to have not only a drug strategy, but also the framework and the beginning implementations of a disease strategy, a disease system. Part of what we were able to do is use the opportunity of Health Canada consultations. So they called their own consultations in January to February, January to March of 2021, and asked for feedback on a series of town hall meetings that they had and a draft consultation framework that they had. In response to that, we presented what we called our 12 steps to a national rare disease framework, based on the huge amount of feedback that we've been getting through our consultations, and also, of course, dialogue with various stakeholders, including the federal government. And I'll just go through very quickly what we feel are the 12 steps to being able to have a national rare disease framework that works not only for patients, but for the whole health system. First is patient empowerment, that we need to make sure that we as the patient organizations, including CORD, but all of the rare disease organizations and beyond that are full partners in this rare disease framework. We are recommending the creation of a standalone Canadian rare disease agency, not necessarily a brick and mortar, but there needs to be a single point of accountability for all of the activities that are related to the access to drugs, from clinical trials all the way through to the monitoring. And this is not going to be an agency that does all these activities, but it will coordinate these activities. It will ensure that they're integrated, ensure that they're timely, ensure that they actually do work seamlessly. The third, we really want to make sure we emphasize in all of this is there is an investment in research and development. And this is something that has been woefully lacking in the Canadian environment for rare diseases for, since the beginning when 1983, the Orphan Drug Act in the US, in 2000, the European Medicines Agency and European Union implementing or passing an Orphan Drug Act there. The concerted investment in rare diseases, not just for research and development of drugs, but also the investment in the system, the investment in monitoring, the investment in terms of patient registries. All of these are critically important if we're going to be able to make sure that we're making the advances in rare diseases and also to work within a global environment. Number 4 is to really speed up access to treatment. That's the heart of what we're talking about, is to make sure that we get timely access to treatments as they become available. But that doesn't just mean that we're going to be able to reimburse them as they're available, but that we actually start from clinical trials, that we actually have programs for early access, including special access programs, that we have sites that are available not just for clinical trials, but to be able to have rapid uptake of these medicines, make them available to patients, monitor them, create patient registries. We have many disease-specific patient registries, but we really don't have a network that is able to have rare disease registries. And we need to bring out all the registries that we have and to make sure that they're working not only nationally and be able to be connected nationally, but internationally. And of course, the patient support programs, not the least of which are the patient organizations. The regulatory barriers that might, make it difficult in terms of, having rare diseases available. The most challenging over the last few years has been the Patent Medicine Price Review Board. Those of you who have been participating know that these guidelines go far above what has ever been in place and has really created a lot of pushback from manufacturers, from developers who really see this as going to be a huge challenge in terms of having clinical trials, being able to have early access to the medicines here. So we need to roll those back. We need to, not push forward in terms of those. And we do know that, PMPRB has delayed their implementation, 3 times now. And we're hoping that, in fact, there will be an opportunity to have a look at those and be able to make some permanent changes in terms of implementations. We need to have the regulatory process continue to move forward from their modernization process that was begun in about 2017, 2019. We are, very supportive in terms of the ways in which Health Canada have been able to approve drugs, especially for small patient populations. But we need to make sure that they're encouraging clinical trials. They're able to do new drug submissions for rare disease drugs. One of the areas that's not working as well is actually providing indications for existing drugs that are extended to use for rare diseases. We lack other countries in being able to give an indication to these therapies that are already in use for other conditions, to apply those to rare diseases, because if there isn't an indication, oftentimes they don't get reimbursed by private drug plans or by public drug plans. So we need to have those pathways for special cases, recognizing that as timely as the process may be, it still takes time. And those time delays are really, limiting factors for patients who are in urgent need of these treatments. Certainly, sometimes these are life-saving treatments, and we need to make sure that we're able to create rapid access pathways, even as we're taking them through the regular regulatory pathways, the same as we've been able to do with vaccines for COVID. We need multiple funding options. We have to have different ways in which we can fund these therapies that are going to be really specific to the kinds of drugs that are coming forward, the patient population size. We cannot have a single one size fits all. We cannot have a single cost effectiveness threshold. We cannot have a single review process and a reimbursement process, because these therapies and these diseases are very different. They're oftentimes unique, and they really do require very specific, tailor-made, customized programs in order for patients to get access at a time when the drugs are available and they could in fact be providing life-saving, life-altering treatment. We have agreed, I think, with many that say the way in which we're going to do this is through managed access programs. And these are drugs that are approved where there is, in fact, still uncertainty in terms of the evidence at the time of approval, in terms of what their future use might be, in terms of their extended use might be, but they are strong enough, they're good enough, and the need is high enough with no other therapies that they should, in fact, be made available. Make them available, continue to monitor. Hate to keep going back to the vaccines and COVID, but that is what we're doing, and that is why these vaccines are there right now, saving lives, preventing diseases. This is the same scenario that we need to apply to these urgently needed therapies for rare diseases, where in fact we are only going to be able to get full information as we're making them available. We need to facilitate the current Health Canada and the cost effectiveness, the assessment reviews. This is something that's happening. We need to accelerate that process so there's not a delay between the regulatory approval, and there's also not a reassessment of the evidence when it goes into the health technology assessment reviews, the cost effectiveness reviews, the reimbursement reviews, that all of it can be done seamlessly and in fact concurrently at the same time. So the drugs, again, available to people as soon as possible. We need to invest in real world evidence generation. We know that many of these drugs are not going to be coming to market and coming to patient use with all the evidence necessary. We need to set up systems where we can continue to collect that evidence, monitor them, reassess them. With many of the therapies, with many of these diseases, we already have that in place. As we look at, spinal muscular atrophy, we look at many of the bone diseases, hypophosphatasia, hypophosphatemia, all these drugs are coming in, lysosomal storage diseases, Fabry, MPS, Pompe's, all these have come in with the opportunity to continue to collect real world evidence. We've never done it systematically. We do not really have a process for how we evaluate those. And we certainly do not necessarily use that evidence to actually decide, okay, can we update the evidence base? Can we use that to really understand what is working, what is not working, who else should be included, and maybe who else should not be, continuing treatment? These are really important. And this is the next generation. No longer evidence collected just in clinical trials, but really collected based on real world usage. And we have to have centers of excellence. All of these are really presaged on the fact that we will have a vibrant, well-resourced network, centers of excellence, disease specific, but also networked across diseases, because there are many similarities across rare diseases. And by having a network that can work together, the same as the Europeans have for European reference networks, we can actually make sure that we're getting the most out of the researchers and the clinics that we have. So this is also where much of that research can actually be taking place. So 12 steps. many of which are already taking place, but not being done systematically and certainly not adequately resourced. So I've used this only to say, spinal muscular atrophy has emerged as one of those disease areas where we really can see how this model is working, or well, also some of the roadblocks in it. But if we can build on what is taking place in terms of the network for SMA with the patient registry, the newborn screening, if we're able to really focus on how this is actually coming together in terms of integrated comprehensive care, and to really resource it, this can be somewhat of a blueprint for us in terms of all of our diseases, and maybe also a rare disease network across Canada. This, as I say, was our 5-point plan that we presented in 2015. And now it comes to the forefront to say, this is what we need to do. If we're going to have rare disease drug access, we need to also have a really robust rare disease system. We need to have early detection and prevention. So diagnosis is key. The centers that we talked about, specialty centers, network together. Robust community support, including patient organizations, an access program that is going to be timely, but also sustainable, and also focusing on on therapies with emerging evidence and the ongoing collection of it, and the promotion of research to support all of this, but also to advance our own contributions to not just drug development, but actually to the knowledge around rare diseases. And we have all of these in place. We just need to make sure that we properly integrate them and that we properly resource them. I won't go into detail, but this is our look into the future, but starting almost immediately. And these are initiatives that are taking place globally that we want to make sure that we're a part of. We talked about having a Canadian network for rare diseases, but this is going to be part of, very importantly, the WHO Rare Disease International Global Network for Rare Diseases. So hopefully we can use this model, which is developing, to actually make sure that we've got a Canadian model that can actually work as part of a global community. This is starting, this is happening, consultations are already in place, funding is already beginning to take place to create this. We need to be a part of it. We want to make sure that we're able to do the right kinds of assessment for rare disease treatments. What we know is the current HTA process does not work. Over and over again, it comes up with recommendations that are really restrictive in terms of which patients get access, and make far too big of a focus in terms of the cost of the therapies as opposed to the value of the therapies. So we need to make sure that we can redo how do we assess these drugs in terms of who should get access to them, how they should be monitored, and at the end of the day, what other evidence that we need to collect. So this has got to be redone. We're in the process of doing it. We're very happy with agencies, certainly like Health Canada, like CHR, like CADA, that are coming together to say, okay, can we create a unique value-based assessment for rare disease treatments? But we know we're going to have to lead a lot of that. Patient registries and real world evidence. So this is the core of what we've been talking about. We need to focus on that. We want to have a whole network that can begin to talk about how do we actually put together the patient registries that are in place? How do we bring together all of the work that's being done on real world evidence so that we can actually have a systematic view? Cancer is doing that right now. We need to do that same in the rare disease environment. We have the same kinds of challenges in terms of innovative therapies that need to be able to be monitored. But beyond that, we want to make sure that we have all patients as they're being diagnosed to be able to enter into a registry so that we know which patients there are and how we can actually recommend patients, for clinical trials or to bring clinical trials to Canada. All of this is going to be important. We have, again, many registries that are in place. We have the beginnings of these kinds of initiatives. We need to bring it together to make it truly functional. And the value-based pricing. I talked a little bit about the Patent Medicines Pricing Review Board, the challenge in terms of high-cost therapies, that everybody seems to focus just on the cost and not in terms of what the value is. I think what we want to do, certainly with our international counterparts, is to figure out how do we come up with responsible pricing for these therapies? What is the right way in which we can finance these therapies so that, especially for the new therapies that are gene therapies, cellular therapies that are likely to be, either lifetime, treatments or eventually what we could call a cure. How do we make sure that they're being able to be made available to people despite the fact that they may be, very expensive from a one-time or a initial upfront kind of cost? So this is important, but the pricing of these medicines has become the target, we want to refocus on what's the value of these medicines and how do we assure that we've got, you know, the value up front as we think about how we're going to make them sustainable and affordable. This, I won't belabor, we just created a bit of a what we're going to do and how we're going to do it for the collaborative global networks, which we're hoping many of you will get involved in. This is the same thing in terms of the value assessment treatments. What are we going to do? What are the working groups that we need together? And what we're hoping will be the final product, and that is this kind of an outcome. And the third thing in terms of patient registries. This is just our vision in terms of how we need to put these modules in place as we're wanting to move towards the implementation of the rare disease drug strategy, which we have just recently, in consultations with Health Canada, have been given a potential start date for March of 2022. This would be absolutely amazing. You know, they said 2022. We've been pushing them to be there. We know that we need to do a lot to make sure that we get there. And we don't need everything in place. We don't even need the whole $1 billion in order to get started, but we need to have work plans that will put the foundations in place so that when we start to, you know, to implement this strategy, that we actually can make it work. So this is what we're saying. We want to jumpstart that process. These are the 12 steps that we talked about. They need to fit in with the rare disease drug strategy that we talked about. So this is really important. This is our focus, you know, starting almost immediately, and hopefully everybody can get involved in. And certainly for this federal election, we want to make sure that our rare disease community is out there, that we're able to respond to certainly the report that came from Health Canada on what we heard, which was actually quite a brilliant report, because it really was the first time that we felt we had a what we heard report that really did reflect what we thought we said. So this is a very good start. The Patent Medicine Prices Review Board, it's been delayed for a third time since June 2020. And we're really hoping that there can be substantial changes in terms of the guidelines that will not put tremendous restrictions on the pricing in a way that's going to keep us from not being able to get access to the medicines that we need. And, you know, so we're hoping that all of you will certainly take an active role with us, continue with us. We've been absolutely amazed and thrilled with the participation in the webinars that we've been hosting over the years. Honestly, we've had, you know, over 200 people in some of these. This really is a sign that the rare disease community is very active, very strong, and it includes many, many stakeholders who are very committed to helping us move forward. So thank you very much. We've had an amazing year despite COVID, and maybe buoyed up by COVID. So, you know, we know that we're going to be living with this pandemic for a good while longer yet. So we're not talking about what can we do now that the pandemic's over. We know that we can actually execute a great deal despite the other kinds of challenges that we've got. So thank you very much. Look forward to engaging with you for the next year and certainly for the years to come.